Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and get started with this afternoon's panel session. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, U.S. Army retired, President and CEO of AFCEA International.
I'm waking them up for you, Bruce. I want to make sure they're ready to go here. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us again this afternoon for our final session on the main stage, a panel discussing accelerating enhanced capabilities from the tactical edge to the enterprise. But at this time, I'd like to bring Chief Warrant Officer 4 Tim Reyna up on the stage. All right. It is my distinct honor to let you all know that Tim has just recently joined us as our new CIO CTO. We couldn't be more excited about having him on the team. So welcome, sir. And I'm just going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everybody's enjoying the show, and it's a good day to be here. So today I have the distinct privilege and honor to introduce a good friend of ours, a big supporter. GDIT is the sponsor for this panel, and the speaker that I would like to bring up is Major General Retired Garrett Yee. He's our Vice President of General Dynamics for Information Technology. Sir.
I thought for sure Tim was going to say something about bourbon and cigars, but he didn't. Good thing. We don't talk like that. You know, as I was walking around, I saw a bunch of old timers like me out here. I saw Mark Andrus walking around somewhere, Rich Aldrich, wherever Rich is at, Fred Henry, you out there somewhere, and I think Frank K was out there as well. So good to see you all, and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for the Service CIO panel today. TechNet Cyber, Baltimore, here we are. I'm Garrett Yee, Vice President, General Manager of the Army and Defense Agencies at General Dynamics Information Technology. GDIT. I'd like to take a moment to recognize our conference host, AFCEA International, Lieutenant General Retired Susan Lawrence, our President and CEO. Give her a hand. I've always been a fan of General Lawrence, and so it's really a pleasure for me to be part of the AFCEA committee now and as the Vice Chair, so I'm happy to be here doing this. But their work has brought together critical forums like this one where we can have transparent discussions between, government and industry in a safe place, right, where we can talk about things. I like this morning's talk from General Skinner with like the Chinese interpretation of his Thunderdome. I thought that was pretty clever, but I think, that just kind of a reality check for all of us that whatever we do and say is kind of out there. So it's my these are all my friends over here as well. Oh my gosh. So it's my pleasure, privilege, honor to introduce the moderator of today's panel, Lieutenant General Retired Bruce Crawford, my former boss in the CIOG-6. And I'm on the audit subcommittee, or the finance and budget subcommittee, where I'm his deputy or his vice now, so I'm working for Bruce once again. Oh my gosh. Quickly, a native of Columbia, South Carolina, Lieutenant General Crawford was commissioned in 1986, do the math. He was recognized as a distinguished military graduate, an amazing career, all the way up through to the 3-star level of the Army, the final and last Army CIOG-6 before they split it apart. And so Bruce is also on the executive committee of AFCEA International and the Budget and Finance Committee chair. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Retired Bruce Crawford.
We'll get the team up here. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, we'll just go ahead and get settled in and get the conversation going. So Garrett, first of all, it was great to see you, and much nicer to see your better half. last night. Yeah, you're a boss. But thanks so much for the warm introduction. And it's really great to be back in the Charm City with what I consider to be one of our national treasures, to be quite honest. And I truly believe that in my heart of heart, and that national treasure is actually AFCEA. It's great to be here with AFCEA doing what AFCEA does better than anybody else, and that's connecting people to solve hard problems. And so for the past 10 years to the subject that we're going to discuss today, and it's really about enhancing capabilities from the tactical edge to the enterprise with some touch pieces in the area of cybersecurity. But for the last 10 years, we've heard our leadership begin a conversation with a big idea. And that big idea was that, technology actually had the ability to not only change the character of future warfare, but also to accelerate the growth of businesses. And so that's that industry Department of Defense connection. And so that said, among the questions we have before us, because you've been hearing it all week, you've been hearing it for years, we're at an inflection point. After thinking about this, so all of my bad ideas come from when I'm out running, so I was out running, and I was thinking about this, and I'm not sure it's an inflection point. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Where I think we are is at a point where we've got unprecedented opportunity based on the conversations that have been had over the last 10 to 15 years, where I'm of the opinion that we went from really not having the conversations we needed to have with industry to having not only conversations, but developing some trusted relationships. And so I think it's less about an inflection point, and I think where we are now is more about an area where we've got unprecedented opportunity to make a difference. So, looking forward to a great conversation. I'm joined here, and we'll throw it over to him in a second, by Rob Vetmeyer, Chief Software Officer, Office of the Chief Information Officer at DoD. Ms. Jane Rathman, by the way, Jane and I spent some time upstairs, so world hunger is no longer a problem. We solved it. That's right. It's done. We were together earlier. But Jane Rathman, Jane, thanks so much for being here, Chief Information Officer, Department of the Navy. Mr. Ken McNeil, Chief Information Officer in J6 of the National Guard, and Mr. Winston Beauchamp, Deputy Chief Information Officer, Department of the Air Force. And so with that, I'll turn it over to each one of them for some opening remarks.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. And as you mentioned, Rob Vetmeyer, Chief Software Officer, working out of the DoD CIO. So really excited time, and I have to tell you, I'm really only here for the bourbon cigars that General Yi was just mentioned. So we'll get through this panel. But no, I want to echo off your discussion with this inflection point and the point that we have unprecedented opportunity at this point. And I want to mention that DoD CIO just released yesterday, announced at this conference, our new modernization strategy for the department, Fulcrum. Covering down on our focus for the joint warfighting community, our focus for IT infrastructure modernization, which is really my focus on, how do we deliver and operate in a software-defined world, and what's that mean? If we look at the changing battlefield, how do we position the department for that? Also in Fulcrum, covering down on how do we optimize IT governance across the department, and how do we the tough challenge that's been a lot of discussions throughout the day on our workforce and capital. So really what we're trying to do with Fulcrum is give the senior leaders across the department the tools and mechanisms they need to actually drive this transformational change across the department. And I think through this session, we'll drill into some of those areas. So looking forward to the discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Rob. Jane?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming, and thanks for sponsoring AFCEA and our corporate sponsors. Jane Rathman, the Department of Navy CIO, officially since October of last year. I was in the job acting for a bit, and so I'm about to release my Information Superiority Vision 2.0. We've learned a lot in the last 5 years and have recognized that we need to make some key directional pivots. They're not too far off from our modernize, innovate, and defend. We're moving to optimize, secure, and decide. To the General's first point, we have to put the lens of the warfighter First and foremost, the future state, end state, is a warfighter has information at the ready, securely delivered from anywhere to anywhere, where they need it, and it's information. It is not 5 data streams that they have to integrate themselves, that they actually can take that information, add new information to it from their sensors, and give their leadership options at the speed of need. And so we'll talk probably a little bit about my information superiority vision and what we're going to focus on, but I think our future is tech-informed concepts of employment, leveraging this modern technology that exists today in the time frame we're talking about, this decade of concern for the CNO, the next less than 1,000 days. This is a space where we can actually make some improvements and give our warfighters redundancy and resiliency in their C2 capabilities partnering with our industry partners.
Absolutely love it. Love it. Operationally focused. Winston?
Good afternoon, and thank you also to FC International and for the local chapter for sponsoring this event. I'm the Deputy CIO for the Department of the Air Force, and my primary job is running the implementation plan to respond to Fulcrum, of course, as all MILDEPs, right? Right? And most of my time over the past 6 or 8 months have been focused on Secretary of the Air Force's priorities, because we're fascinated by our boss's priorities, to reorganize the department for great power competition. And primarily what that means for the part of the Air Force that's responsible for enterprise information technology is in the era of integration and centralization. So for many years, the Air Force has been able to deliver IT via county option, and really the priorities for both tech debt and performance and really cybersecurity has closed out a lot of those options, and we're moving towards an era where we're going to be delivering a lot more centrally from the enterprise. And that requires a lot of changes. Oddly enough, most of those changes are not technology, they are people and process. And so redesigning the way we do work, the way we're organized to do that work. So you're going to see some announcements coming out over the next couple of months about how we're going to change the structure inside the department to be able to respond with speed and alacrity to the threats that we perceive from near-peer competitors. And so a lot of the time and effort has been focused on that. We're looking at, some of those announcements have already been made about standing up a separate A6 and establishing an S6, and there'll be others coming out as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing some alignment here, which is definitely a good thing. And so super excited to have Ken here, and I'm not sure how many people know this, but I actually keep track of this. But probably our most tenured when it comes to the chief information officers of all the different services that are a part of the DoD. And so Ken, any opening thoughts?
Well, thank you for that introduction. And again, thank you, AFCEA International. This is always great to get an opportunity to tell the Guard story. I would be remiss if I don't say this up front. And my staff coined this phrase, this is not your grandparents' National Guard anymore. So my responsibility is supporting 430,000 guardsmen, soldiers, and airmen in 54 states and territories in the District of Columbia with all things IT. One of the things when you think of the National Guard, you say, well, you know, they're made up of 2 services and now Joint Staff, Army and Air Force. One of the things that keep me up at night, it's number one, the Homeland mission. That is our most critical mission for the National Guard. We're always going to support the Army and Air and go fight and win American wars overseas, but if we don't get the Homeland right. So with that said, we deal with a lot of interagency and local communities as far as providing interoperable communications. A guardsman is called out every day to support a community. Sometimes it's big and you get to read about it, a hurricane, wildfires, civil disturbance, but most of the time you don't. And they're supporting a first responder. And when you're supporting a first responder or a non-government agency, you still have to communicate, you still have to be interoperable. But the biggest thing is you have to secure the network. So We spent a lot of time getting our zero trust plan right and working those tools and capabilities just to make sure that we are not the risk to the DoD. So we'll talk a little bit about that a little more later, but that's kind of the guard up front story.
All right, and Ken, and to our panelists, thanks in advance for your support. So we'll jump right into questions here. $15 trillion enterprise. When you think about, information technology globally, it's predicted to be a $15 trillion enterprise. And so this first question has to do with information technology and technology in general as a strategic asset. And so the first question, and Rob, this is to you. You'll get the first up at bat here. Is how's the department aligning its IT and digital transformation strategy to reduce cybersecurity risk and enhance cyber resilience?
Yeah, so we'll take, overall with Fulcrum, the focus on the warfighter as line of effort one. And if you look at Ukraine, I think it gives a good example of what the speed and resilience we're going to need for the next conflict, right? So if you look at Ukraine, it started off with cyber war, rapidly moved into air attacks, right? Then into sort of 19th century trench warfare, and then into drone warfare, and then into electromagnetic spectrum warfare, right? So we have to be adaptable in ways that, and resilient and quick in ways that we haven't really prepared for in the past, right? The next conflict is not going to be the last conflict. And so how do we take, to Jane's point, how do we take these modern technologies, a lot of them out there on the floor, our industry partners keep bringing us these new innovations, how do we take advantage of that and get those out there to support the warfighter? And I think one of the things that we found, it's not just a technical problem that we're facing. There really is this difficult change, cultural change that we have to go through. We have to change, how we acquire things. We have to change what's our relationship with industry. What we're seeing, myself with the, trying to drive the software factory, software modernization, the cloud, we're starting to see this changing environment where, in terms of our relationship with industry, where we're starting to have blended teams. If we need to move fast, we can't do the traditional model of, hey, we're going to spend 2 years writing requirements, put those out on the street, let industry spend a couple years delivering, right? We need to have industry and government operating together with, one of the main focuses of Fulcrum is the user experience. So where we're delivering in this minimum viable capability model where the job's never done, and we have the user giving us dynamic feedback on what's working, what's not working, and the team's responding. And if you think through all the implications of that, it really changes the way we operate. So then if we take the networking level of this, we are modernizing from the networking infrastructure, building in zero trust to begin with, because we're going to have to be able to have data coming off of sensor platforms from the Navy, from the Air Force, and then potentially sending that to shooters that are allied, right? Instantaneously, that this flow of information, we can't build these sort of walled garden networks and models. So we're really looking at the zero trust models, incorporating that into our infrastructure, and we have to do this in a resilient way. So how do we start to take cloud computing and the hybrid cloud solutions out there to build capabilities out the edge of our networks and be able to synchronize data and workloads seamlessly. And then of course how do we secure and defend this environment, and looking at from a offensive and defense, or from a defensive cyber perspective, how do we retune some of our cyber initiatives and our cyber security to deal with this ongoing change, to deal with these zero trust models, to deal with the level of transitioning from sort of network level cyber defense to application and data level cyber defense. So I think we have the piece parts in there in place, but it really is going to take this community and working with our counterparts here to really drive this forward and working with industry.
Yeah, love the reference to our allies also, especially given the fact that our FCA team is now looking to the transatlantic now for doing this type of thing. So I think there'll be some opportunity there.
Yeah, and the commands have been clear to us, right? We used to say SIPRNet is our warfighter network, and they're like, no, we fight on our mission partner networks, right?
Yes.
You guys in DC need to get it, understand that our mission partners, we don't operate without them. So retune how you're delivering IT to support that.
Yeah, absolutely. Serious culture change.
Yeah.
Jane, IT as a strategic asset.
Yeah, I love that statement. I use it a lot to say that this is not your mom and pop IT that you buy with cleanup dollars, right?
Yeah.
You need to really strategically architect your ecosystem, and your ecosystem has to be redundant and resilient, and it has to be able to fight through. For our warfighter, and it has to be usable for the warfighter. And so our whole kind of approach with our strategy and our thinking in the Department of Navy is how do we design tech-informed concept of employments that are cloud-based. The Marine Corps is very much their concept of operations is they're fighting with the cloud. Enterprise or foxhole to flagpole, they like to say, and it's true. They are really designing, and the movements and the changes that they're making to their ecosystem are to do just that. Leverage cloud, take cloud with them on the back of a razor in the first island chain. And so when that's what they want to do and how they want to operate, how do we think and architect about that edge all the way back to the mothership of where most of our data is going to live? How do we build algorithms that allow us to get trained models to the edge that, again, can learn from the sensors, the sensors that are at the edge and give warfighters information at the speed of relevance? That has to be kind of our mindset. What needs to change is that we can't, the Department of Navy is very platform centric, so they spend all of their palm time talking about platforms. We spend very little time talking about the interoperability pieces. That's changing, and that's a good thing. We this year had a network LOE during the POM process to really think through some of these connective pieces of tissue that need to work across all of our platforms. And so that is a recognition in my mind that IT is a strategic asset, and that we have to build that architecture, that stack that can be agile, can be easily maneuvered, and that means thinking about simplification too.
Yes.
And not having. So I 100% agree. We need an environment, a secure environment. I'm not going to say secret, top secret, or unclassified. I'm going to say an environment that we believe is secure, where we can maneuver. We are going to implement zero trust principles, and so do attribute-based access control at the data level. If we want to control at the data level, we have to change a whole lot about how we operate today to really get the most out of our IT infrastructure.
And your perspective at the edge also aligns well with our conversation last week. Ron. Winston?
Yeah, in the Department of the Air Force, we've long lived in a world where we had a network that was responsible for operating and maintaining an F-15, and another one for an F-35, and another one for an F-16, and another one for a B-1, and another one for a B-2, all at multiple security levels, and all of those enclaves operated by the program office itself, usually executed by the vendor. And then we have an enterprise network that would be responsible for your email and your business systems. And what we have come to realize is that a sophisticated adversary is not going to respect our boundaries. And if they can slow down our flow of forces into theater by shutting down our logistics systems on our enterprise network, that's just as important a thing to protect, because it's a thing that will slow down our ability to defend and needs to be protected as much as a mission system on a weapon system network. So what we have looked at doing is, to what extent can we make our enterprise network the backbone upon which the weapon systems ride, where possible at the right security levels, so that when we go to defend, we do so in an integrated enterprise level way.
Yes.
Right? There's no possible way that 127 enclaves, the number I picked out of the air for no particular reason, are going to be able to patch and update their software, even if it's commercial software that all, of course, needs updating and patching on a regular basis, simultaneously. And anytime it's not done at the same time, you've got a seam that becomes a vulnerability and an access point for an adversary to intervene. And so, to the extent that we can patch instantly via an enterprise push, if it's all visible to us and all accessible by us, we can keep those systems up to date much better, much faster, much more reliably than if we're relying upon a bunch of information system security officers in each of those 127 enclaves.
And it sounds like also, to Jane's point, you're dealing with a very complex situation, but you're also trying to simplify.
That's right.
As best you can, to her point.
Absolutely.
Earlier. Ken?
So one of our primary efforts right now is transforming and transitioning from a net-centric environment to a data-driven environment. Obviously, we ride off of the Army network and AFNet on the air side. So our biggest challenge is as we transition with the security piece of it, because of who we communicate with at the local, state level, and non-government agencies, is protecting that data and securing the network. We have to communicate with those partners out there. So it's a we've put some tools in place as we transition and going through. We're focused on just a couple of pillars right now with the Zero Trust plan. We want to make sure, though, we don't go and do duplication of effort with the two services, right? So we're focused on the piece that we have to do to interoperability communications with our interagency partners. That is critical. The reason the data is critical because we're now at the next level of, you hear us talk about hurricanes, wildfires. We've done some really good work with, for example, California CAL FIRE, and using our dual capability, MQ-9s, to predict the next path. And so when you're doing all of that, you're connected to civilian and non-government agencies. So the key is the Zero Trust framework, priority, cybersecurity. We have struggled in that area. We're getting a lot better thanks to our partners from the two services and working with us. But the biggest key to that is making sure that all 54 states and territories can do their job and stay secure. And so that's our constant struggle as we go forward. But we're all making progress with the Zero Trust plan.
Ken, it sounds like if you've got industry partners that are out in the audience, there's opportunity, since we kind of started the conversation there,
Absolutely.
at the state and local level to help the National Guard.
So one of the positives that we've done and we're pretty proud of in the last 5 years is connecting with our industry partners, bringing them in and really working at the National Guard Bureau headquarters level to bring in capability that can help the 54. What we try to do is, and we like ideas bubbling up from the states also, but we do keep in mind enterprise solutions, right? Everyone has a great idea. I get to hear it, but we've been key with that. An example of that is, I was going to talk about it later, is what we're doing with Bring Your Own Device. We partner with an industry partner called Hapori, and we're working with them, and now almost 5 years later, we have soldiers and airmen that don't have GFE mobile capability that can stay connected, because we have to stay connected. 93% of the Guard do not have GFE, but it has to be secure. So that's one of the examples of a positive story of how we really want to hear from industry, how we can really continue to move forward with our domestic operation mission.
Ken, you're a great straight man, because the next question actually has to do with software modernization. So when you think about the software part of the marketplace, it's predicted in 2024, and I believe it's Gartner, if I'm not mistaken, that predicted that software is actually going to be the third largest aspect of the tech market from starting in 2024 and beyond. So the next question actually has to do with software modernization, and I know there's lots of interest in that, both inside DoD and outside. But so the question, and I'll start with you, Rob, what process transformation initiatives or best practices have you seen? And I know you spent a lot of time, probably more than anybody else, to accelerate the deployment and scaling of secure, more resilient software.
Yeah, so my wheelhouse. So we can go all afternoon and evening on this one. But let me just bring up a couple points. So we are in this software modernization journey, and I think we've put in place a good foundation. I think what we learned from the CIO side is that we couldn't do it alone because the biggest problems aren't technology. So I can talk CI/CD pipelines, I can tell people how to configure Kubernetes, the whole bit, and lock it down, but that's not where the gaps were, right? So we found we had to team with ANS and R&E and with the MilDeps, ANS contributing the new software acquisition pathway. And what we're finding is those models, right? So it's not just what technology, it's how we acquire it, how we contract for it. So there's these piece parts that we're working through, and then how do we optimize across the department? So we have been driving with the MilDeps the software factory ecosystem build out, working with them to optimize so that we can re-leverage software components across those environments. I think the community's been doing a great job sort of at the grassroots level. I mean, software developers at the end of the day are really lazy people, right? And if someone else has written something, they want to take it. And so it's been fun. It's been really fun to see how that community has evolved. We used to think about programs competing with one another and people trying to protect their intellectual property. That doesn't happen in this new modern software world. And why it's critical is because we talked about simplification, which we absolutely need to get to. Our environments right now are way too complex, but the environments we're building from sort of a hardware level are going to be more simple, but from a software perspective are going to be more complex. And we've got to be able to manage those configurations. So if you think about cloud computing, cloud in my mind is really software-defined infrastructure, right? The new routers, the new networks, all of this stuff, it's going to be software-defined. So we've got to get much better at how we're managing those configurations, how we're able to push those software changes, how we're, at the end of the day, from a hardware perspective and an operations perspective, it's going to look simpler, but from a configuration and change management, we need that software expertise to drive that, that zero trust configuration changes in there and making sure it's resilient and adaptable to these changing mission needs. And so I think we have the piece parts, and the next phase that we're looking at now is, how do we get after some of these challenges? We have some really cutting edge programs that are doing amazing work across all the MilDeps. But that's rare. That's the exception. That's not the common practice. And in many cases, they are, weapon systems or they're smaller implementations. We have this big legacy tech debt issue that we have to get after. And all of those systems are following the old practice. They're in sustainment, right? In the modern way, we have no sustainment. Your software's never done. Your system's never done. But we have to figure out, how do we make this transition? How do we work across the department to eliminate this anchor called tech debt that's holding us back from making some of these advances that we need to be able to do rapidly to move us toward this modernization. So I think that's where we are in the journey. We have these cutting edge, and now we're trying to take that next step. How do we make that approach the default?
Yeah, the whole technical debt part of the discussion is a 2-hour seminar in and of itself, but it's probably one of the most least understood challenges
Yeah.
when you start talking about software optimization specifically in the DoD. So thanks for also mentioning that. Jane?
Yeah, so building on what Rob said, I think, first of all, I came out of the acquisition community right before coming into the CIO community. So it's partnership with acquisition and the CIO together to drive change, culture change. Again, I mentioned that the Department of Navy is very platform centric and and so our program ecosystem, our program management ecosystem is you're focused on your thing. You don't actually look left and right very often, and so you don't know if what you're doing is impacting others. And so we have been experimenting in a lot of places. I think we just recently did a count of software factories. It's like 54 in various stages of capability. Overmatch Software Armory is probably our most advanced one, and the Project Overmatch, which is our CJAD C2 kind of focused activity, is really recognizing the value of leveraging a platform, a DevOps platform, and being able to push software quickly to the edge. They're realizing standards and guardrails are necessary, getting people simplicity, getting people to a common set of platforms and some basic rules of engagement. I'm going to use concept of employment a lot today because it is a process, as you said, that really needs to be put in place and practiced. Our next generation of software developers coming in are going to expect that the tooling is there, that they can just spin up an environment and start working and start developing software day one, dollar one, and that's not the case yet. And so how do we make this shift to trusting that someone else can deliver that stack to you that you can just develop on, and that you don't need, except for very few unique cases, you don't need your own thing. And so that is our partnership with RDA. Our RDA is our acquisition organization, is really responsible for delivering software and is driving kind of software modernization change. But we want to help them, push them, provide them concept designs of what right looks like. You can say you're agile all day. Are you really agile? Right. And then we want to get to enterprise services where, again, we have an initiative, the Air Force's Platform One, ours is called Black Pearl, where we want to get to, my vision is that we have a platform orchestration capability that works with all clouds, that it's not cloud specific. Nice. Because I think you're going to need that flexibility and that agility to meet mission need.
That sounds like you're already, so the next question, hint for the audience, that we're going to talk about people and we're going to talk about talent. It seems like you're already baking that into your plan, having modern tools, et cetera, that just kind of fall in and get to work. That helps keep them. What's it? Software
We have a similar set of challenges to the Navy on this side. Jane mentioned Platform One is our flagship software factory. There's been multiple instantiations of that, as well as others that were more customized for certain mission areas. For example, the stack for a maintenance shop, a depot, is going to be different from one that's developing for a brand new weapon system, for example. But that really informs the make versus buy decision in a lot of ways, because and it's on a continuum, right? So everything from the bespoke development at a vendor that we've traditionally done, that's gone down significantly from what we have done in the past, to one where we've placed heavy emphasis upon DevSecOps through one of the factories. And then on the other end of the extreme is going to be shrink-wrap software you buy through an enterprise agreement, right? And so we found lots of opportunities for savings there as an alignment, really. Mm-hmm. So if you can pick an enterprise solution to do a thing, do a function for the department, and then rally around that, you can get that economic order quantity up, and you can get much better in terms of pricing as well as in interoperability. And so every step along that continuum, I think we have to be applying attention and focus to in order to both wring the savings out of where the spend is today, as well as look to where it needs to be in the future in order to provide that capability to the warfighter. Yep.
Sounds like you're also trying to incentivize adoption, though, by putting, from the savings perspective, putting it back into the force.
That's right. So I could go to each of the 27 people that are buying a commercial software package today, and I can say, hey, let me take the instance that you have built just for your use case, consolidate it into an enterprise instance, and potentially give you back 20% of your money. What do you think of that? And we generally get very positive responses to things like that.
Okay. All right, so Ken, you started this early, the software discussion with fascinating to watch where the department's come over the last 3.5 to 4 years with respect to, from a culture perspective and actual deliverable perspective with the whole BYOD initiative. So any additional thoughts on software optimization?
We're forced to adapt, right? So for the Guard, when you see the Guard, called out in communities, and you say, well, okay, they're not full time, and most of the soldiers and airmen, right? They have jobs, they work every day, and they have to be connected. So we learned in 20, we were called out, the largest call out, total Guard since World War II, and what we were doing here on the homeland, we were like, okay, how are we keeping our soldiers and airmen connected, right? 93% of them don't have cell phones, your mobile devices. You're called out to do a mission. How they staying connected, how they're doing mobilization planning. So we started looking at modernization and capability out there, software defined, where we can have this capability on your personal devices. It meant so. And to be quite honest, when the idea was kind of floated, I think the only partner I had was General Crawford at the time. Everybody else thought it was probably a crazy idea because you're never gonna put stuff on your personal phones and secure it. And I said we have to. So we really put a lot of time and effort working with the department, working with the headquarters department of the Army, and working with our partners, Winston and Jane and I. We're talking next level. But these are critical capabilities that the Guard would ordinarily, kind of wait on the services to do and then adapt them. We did something that normally is not done. We went out, we talked to industry. Every good idea that you think you have is already happening out there, right? Industry is probably doing it. We brought in industry partners and we talked the art of possibilities of how to do it. So that's one example, but that is how we see our future going forward in the National Guard for those critical mission space that we need, that maybe are a little unique from our warfighting skills, that we work closely with the Air and the Army on as far as providing that type of capability. And so we're way down the road moving there towards continuing to bring in industry to look at other capabilities for our domestic mission space. And also, one of the things I have to mention, we have a program called State Partnership Program, where we partner with partner nations to support the COCOMs. That is huge because we have to be able to communicate with them too. And we know we have mission partner, we know we have all of the Title 10 capabilities that we use, but that's huge in the Guard. Every state has a mission partner, to include Ukraine, which was California, and it was critical in the beginning of that war to have communications and to be able to work together with the Ukrainian military working closely with the California Guard. And so we encourage industry to come in, but I use the bring your own device example of something that started as an idea and just saying it's something that may not happen to right now. It's used in the department with the Air Force, with the Army. The Space Force is looking at adopting it. We highly encourage that going forward.
Yeah, it sounds like although it was a focused initiative with BYOD, it's become a catalyst
Right.
really a template for how you're going to bring capability,
Yes, absolutely.
categorically into the Guard.
Yes.
And we are doing the same thing with our reserve,
Yeah.
BYOAD. I mean, this is a use case that is prime for not the tail on trying to deliver Navy equipment to a reservist.
Yeah.
And our reservists are everywhere. It doesn't make logical sense. So if we can give them things like virtual desktop
Yes.
that they can get from their own computer, or they can have bring your own device, and we can give them mobile capability that's secure,
Yeah,
it's
that's
software
secure.
based and
Yeah.
secure, and has the same protections as using our own computers. I mean, that just makes logical business
Right.
sense and operational sense.
No, absolutely. I think great learnings. And it looks like, again, back to alignment and collaboration amongst the services. And so,
Absolutely.
good work by all. So next question. I could be wrong, but I believe the key to our competitive advantage on the global stage, whether it's as a nation or as a department, has to do with people. All right, and it has to do with our ability to recruit and retain the best and brightest, to include upskilling and reskilling the workforce that we have today. And so the next question has to do with whether you call it the war for talent. I call it personally the race for talent, because I think it's more of a race. But I'll start here with you, Rob. What actions are you seeing, or actions that you're taking to ensure that we're recruiting, retaining the workforce, not just the one that we need today, but the workforce of the future?
Oh, absolutely. And I agree 100% that that's our strategic advantage right there, is the people. So, I mentioned Fulcrum to begin with, and I'll highlight that LOE4 in Fulcrum is all about the human capital side of things. I will give our workforce team all the credit in the world for the work that they've already put in place. So we have leveraging all of the authorities we could pull together, leveraging the cyber accepted service. We have now defined 72 work roles, so moving away from occupational series and other things. So independent of that, we can now hire against these 72 different job codes, and we're working with the military departments right now to identify the people that are in those positions, and so we can start to track how are our retention, how are our recruitment efforts going against these critical positions. I'll point out that we have in that 72, there's some of them are cybersecurity, obviously. But we have, I think, 9 software roles, software engineering roles identified in that. We have standard IT roles for critical positions, AI, machine learning. So we're putting in place these mechanisms and then working with the military departments and the components to now start to collect the data against that. How are we doing, and how are we leveraging these additional authorities, these additional mechanisms? But beyond that, I think one of the really interesting things that I'm finding personally is that there's some work we can do just as a government internally, right? The complaint I hear the most about that's holding us back is it's taking folks 8 months to a year to bring candidates on. Yes. We can do better, right? We can advertise positions against what the job really is, rather than saying, hey, listen, we're looking for a 2210 and speaking government speak. We can speak industry speak in our advertisements. We can work with our HR departments to really look at how do we optimize? Why is it taking 8 months to a year to bring someone on? We're losing critical talent now just because it's taken us too long to get them on. I mean, that is something we need to eliminate immediately. The other thing I think that's really interesting that the Defense Department can bring, and we're seeing it, is that we have some of the most interesting, most critical work environments. Yes. Right. So leveraging, especially as we move from the model of traditional outsource everything to industry partners, to what we're seeing now moving forward, where we're working together as blended industry and government teams. We are now having more positions on the government side that are in these critical, high demand fields, right? And really, sort of cutting edge challenges that the most talent's looking for, the folks that really are trying to get engaged. And I think we need to be able to leverage that. We need to get Take advantage of the mechanisms we've put in place already. We need to get rid of these inefficiencies. We just get people on, the easy things. And then how do we leverage our expanded role as the government folks in driving critical programs and making that really attractive to top talent to come on board.
It's almost like the meaningful work matters.
It definitely matters. And so in the past, when we were contracting officers and program managers, but someone else was doing the real technical work, it's hard to attract the real technical talent into being a contracting, right? Like it didn't work. But now as that model's changing, and the speed at which we're operating, and we're doing, with the software factories, this is industry cutting edge DevSecOps work, right? We are on the front lines. We are doing better than most of industry, I'll say, and we're learning with them, and we're taking the top technologies in the world's most difficult, challenging environments and employing this. So it's an amazing job experience to get there, and we just need to continue to leverage that.
Jane, I know you're passionate about this.
Yeah,
subject
for sure. And I am the IT cyber data functional lead for the Department of Navy. Rob said is about recruiting talent, making it easier for people to get on board. We've got an amazing mission. I mean, you can get your hands dirty. And the Department of Navy never really got rid of their engineering talent. We have warfare centers. And we have the Office of Naval Research. We have a lot of places where people can do, and all of our acquisition programs can do really cool hands-on, get their hands dirty, and really make change happen for the Department of Navy. So that part, pumping people up and letting them know that they'll probably get more experience earlier in their career coming and working for us, and potentially they would someplace else. That's one piece of it. The other piece is working and partnering with industry on the education and upskilling piece of our current workforce. I was at a dinner last night, and a gentleman from Oracle had said, well, what about certification? How are you doing that? I'm like, what would be really cool is if we could engage you and you're offering certifications for your staff. Hey, let government have a couple of billets in there so that we can get our folks trained. I do think that certifications and quick learning segments are our future in this field because of the ever-changing technology. So the more we can offer platforms, learning platforms, the Air Force has done a lot of work here that are places where sailors, Marines, civilians can go in and get some specific certification for a project they're working on quickly, is going to be very attractive to the way people are learning today. And so we need to elevate the education learning platform piece of it. I think we do have all the authorities we need. Yes. I will say, though, that pay can sometimes be a problem. And so we really need to look at a model where people can flow more freely in and out of government. And recognize that what they're going to get in government is of value that's not necessarily monetary, but then can transition back to industry more easily than we seem to do today.
Mm-hmm. We've got to acknowledge that we've got an arrow, and I spent way more time thinking about this particular problem set than I probably needed to. But we've got an arrow in our quiver that we should collectively, and I say we, like I'm still in the department, but it's called service. Our young people especially want to serve. I didn't know it until I was old that our civilian employees take the same exact oath of office as commissioned officers. And a lot of people don't know that. And so, great observations.
Yeah, I would agree with much of what Rob and Jane have said. We're really grateful for the Cyber Workforce Talent Management Framework that's come out this year. We've been certainly taking advantage of the work roles that have been defined for cyber acceptance service as well. Jane referred to one of our platforms that we use for our continuing education called Digital University, which is an online curriculum mechanism that allows people to take courses in lots of different paths. One of the things we're really growing in, for example, is AI and data, and so we've built a whole new section out for that. But really, what we have done in acknowledgement of what you said earlier about both civilian and military side. The big new initiative for us is the establishment of warrant officers, reestablishment, I should say, in the Air Force. And the only career field right now that's doing it is cyber and IT. So the first class will graduate this year, this fall, and we're going to expand from phase 1 out into what we're calling street to seat, where we can take people right off the street into a field, to get at what you were talking about earlier with, being able to be more flexible in how we bring people in and have a more portability across. We don't have to always grow our own from scratch. We can bring people in mid-career if necessary. And to do that, you have to have flexibility on hiring. The Space Force is also looking at direct commissioning capability from industry specifically for the cyber field, so that we can have much more flexibility, both in terms of our ability to hire, our ability to pay, and the flexibility on some of the standards that we have used in the past, whether it's physical fitness standards or tattoos or piercings or the like. How can we find a way to accommodate people whose job is going to be behind a keyboard and who have a different set of skills and maybe a different set of values, but still a real drive for service, and want to find a way to participate and serve their country.
Yeah, it sounds like in building out this capability when it comes to people and creating opportunities, you're also looking at process that's going to be able to help you streamline. Yeah. Ken?
Well, we have the fortunate advantage point to take advantage of what the services are doing and what the department is doing as far as the workforce framework. But one of the things that we're uniquely have in our arsenal is civilian acquired skills in the National Guard, right? So we bring on every day guardsmen that work with industry, and they have IT cyber skills, and we say, hey, can you take a break and come on for a year or 2 years? Civilian acquired skills is huge in the National Guard, and we leverage that. I know it's not the long-term workforce solution, but it has worked for us. When you talk, AFWorks, the software factories, every time I go out and visit, I spend a couple hours with guardsmen, right, that are out there. And so that's worked for us, and we will continue to leverage that. I think what the department has put in place with the framework, and in particular with our two services, the Army and Air, I think are positives. But I would agree it takes too long to bring individuals on board. They get tired of waiting, and they're in demand, right? This skill set, you're in demand. So we continue to push civilian acquired skills. In my office, we bring in individuals that are, for example, they're on the Chief of the National Guard Bureau comms team, communications team, supporting them. And we are, he told me the other day, stop talking to them, even though they work, in our office, because we'll say, hey, you did this for a year, but you're really a cyber person. You're going back to, company X. We need you to stay here, right, after you leave the Chief's comms team. So that's helped us in the meantime, but I think I would like to see us continue to push heavily in the department to get at a speedier process. And I want a footnote on this. Friday, I'm going to be speaking at the AFCEA Scholarship Luncheon. And so I'm going to have a lot of recruits there. And so I'm going to see, can I sign some of those recruits up? Probably have them to come through the Guard, and then we can do the civilian acquired skills. So, yeah, but that's kind of our big thing that kind of is filling some of the gaps right now in the Guard.
Yeah, I think to put a bow on this one as we transition to the next discussion, which will be an update on Zero Trust implementation, headed towards 27. One final thought on the People Challenge. I think we're rapidly approaching the point where we should give some thought to transition from a focus on certifications to a focus on how do we get the skills, the actual skills. And I get it, certifications are in place for a reason, But that's perhaps a think point, something we should think about whether or not something we want to do. Again, transitioning from just a focus on certifications, and we've been very certification focused, to a focus on identifying the skills and moving in that direction. So just something that I think
So
we should
can I
give some
just say
thought
one
to.
thing? I know we want to wrap this up, but this was probably 3 years ago. I was out at one of the cyber conferences, and the director, CISA, said this, like, we focus on, and I'm not trying to downplay the education piece, when we're focused on you got to get a degree, you got to have all of this. We have to really look at really what the individuals bring to the table. And sometimes we put the piece of paper in as a showstopper, and quite frankly, it's hard to keep up, right? Maybe you don't have the degree, but you have the classes and some of the certifications, and it was interesting how they're doing business to try to get at this workforce shortage as we compete. I just wanted to mention that.
So, update on Zero Trust, all the rage.
Yeah, Zero Trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is one where we're also looking for a lot of contributions from our industry partners as we make this transformation. So, Randy Resnick and our Zero Trust team have published the strategy. We're working with the MilDeps on the implementation. Right now, we're working with them on the gaps that they're seeing, trying to get to that 2027 deadline. But I think the interesting part about Zero Trust is it's not a technology, right? It's really something you do every day. You can't really buy Zero Trust. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can buy a lot of tools that are very useful and helpful in getting us towards that Zero Trust piece. But I think, just as the software modernization is a cultural change, that Zero Trust is another cultural change that we're in the progress of moving towards. And it's absolutely critical because the way we have designed, starting with our networks with these big perimeters and then assuming everybody is trustworthy inside, we know that doesn't work. But now, not only do we know that that's insecure, we know it's ill-suited for the next conflict, right? We need to be able to set up cryptographically separate networks that are connecting us to our mission partners at different classification levels instantaneously. We need to set up, no.
No,
Okay,
I mean, Zero Trust gives us an opportunity to really rethink how we design our ecosystem.
Yeah.
And if we're really data focused, we're not so worried about the network anymore, right?
Yeah, I think that's, so we still have to connect, and we can do it in micro segments, but I agree with you. I think your
Fighting
point's
on
better.
the enemy's network.
Yeah, fighting on,
potentially.
absolutely. So how do we take whatever network's available, whether it's commercial, DoD, adversarial, set up. And I think Jane's right, and the Navy has been pushing the department hard on, if we can secure that data, what does the network have to do with any of it, right? And then so, I find that really intriguing, and I think that's the model we're trying to build towards. I think the hard part for us is that takes advancements in our ability to identify and tag that data. It takes huge advancements in our ability to do people and non-people identity and credential management. We are working with MilDeps and our commercial partners on making advancements through the whole identity, ICAM, but it's a really complex space. And then when we pull in the data side of things, right, we in the department have not done a good job of really training on specific data tags on both the data itself and then on access control tags on people and their attributes, and how do we manage that not as just a application system level access control list, but actually as a enterprise level piece of information that we can have policy enforcement, policy decision points, being able to pull that and make dynamic decisions to make and secure those connections back and forth. So I think we're in that transition where we have a good foundation. Credit to the Zero Trust team for laying out the pillars and breaking that down into what this really means in a way that is helping us move forward with industry. But these next steps are going to be challenging ones for us as we try to actually get to those implementations, and especially as we try to break down. I spent a few days a couple weeks ago trying to break down some SAP labeling and the level of complexity. You think that security classification tags are hard, but wait till you get to secure access programs and SAP SAR sorts of things. It gets really, really complex quickly. So how we get much more advanced in tagging and treating data as an asset. And I'll just leave one last thought, which is it changes how we've organized for cyber defense. I mentioned that at the beginning, but as we transition from defending the network perimeter to defending data, we're ill-suited right now, right? That's another cultural transformation that we have to go through and sort of reorganize, from my perspective, on how we're the technology and approach for cyber defense is going to change.
And 25 is definitely, I'm assuming, is going to be a big year for Zero Trust because 27 is right around the corner.
Right.
Literally things being done in 25 to set conditions for accelerating potentially what I heard this morning in 26 and on the 27th. Jane?
Yeah, so the 27 date, there's things we could do today that don't actually fundamentally get us to where we need to go, but they help, right? So I think the Department of Navy's kind of focus on Zero Trust is not trying to get all 152 or 92?
92.
Because we don't want to be in the checklist business like we were with RMF, right? Zero Trust, to your point, is a set of principles that we should be living and breathing and operating against. And so the whole reason, one of the big reasons for going to Information Superior Vision 2.0 was to recognize and elevate the importance of data in our strategy. And data kind of has three pieces. It is the prepare piece, the connect piece, and the use piece. And we're going to talk about AI later. That would be the use side. Connect, we've already kind of talked about the infrastructure. But the prepare piece is, to Rob's point, we don't have standard ontologies. We don't have good ways of understanding the provenance of our data, of tagging our data, so that it works for our operations. And so this is another, this is a thought exercise that needs to take place for how we want it to work, and then build that strategy and then drive to that strategy. And so I want my chief data and analytics team to be focused on getting to a point where we offer data services that help people tag their data, getting to some common ontologies, not just inside the Department of Navy, but across all of our services, so that we can have data maneuverability. It does change our cyber C2 operators approach if we're not so focused on defending the network and more focused on watching who's accessing, what device they're on, and what their identity piece. And so if we're focused on those pieces, and that's where I think the Navy will put their money and effort in end user device control, into identity and access management, and data, moving our data to that next level of command and control. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on security classification guides, simplifying that ecosystem, and we make it more complicated because we have so many, because risk and consequence of loss of data equals network. How do we get out of that paradigm and move to a paradigm that is more agile, is simpler, so more secure by default, because I'm not trying to defend, 3 networks, right? I'm defending my secure environment, and I understand how my data is organized, et cetera. It's a complete shift, paradigm culture shift, that is going to take a lot longer than 2027 to really live those principles. But there are things, again, identity and access management I think is huge, and we will focus on, that's one of the areas we will focus on.
Yeah, it's some other muscles that are going to have to be kind of developed also, more likely than not, the whole data discovery, data governance, which is,
Yep.
there's lots of dialogue about where we should go with that, to include the other part of it, which is what I'd consider to be trusted backup and remediation on the other side of it, back to the data discussion. Winston?
Yeah, similarly, we're well on our way for the things that you can do top-down. So that means everything from deploying next-gen gateways to replace the functionality that previously was provided by JRSS, to the ICAM, enterprise ICAM capabilities that we're going to be deploying. The challenge, as I see it, is not the work that has to be done by a program office centrally, but rather the thousands of little actions that have to take place at bases, at program offices around the whole department. So here we're talking about changes to an existing program, which might be in development, but it also might be in sustainment, where there's
Right.
not a lot of budget for this sort of thing, to tag and label their data so that it's discoverable and exposable and linkable to the privileges of a person in an ICAM system. That's a tremendous amount of work, and Ms. Chandra Donaldson is right here from our CDAO shop, who is working right now to provide an automated tool to be able to tag data wherever it should live around the department. Similarly, there's work that needs to be done at every base to make sure that we have consistency in how we deal with those tags for people. Right now, one of the big challenges we face is when I want to deploy something to the enterprise, I can test it at one base and it will come to a screeching halt at another base because it's got an entirely different set of group policy objects.
Okay.
And that's a huge challenge. And so standardization and consistency will help in multiple ways. I wish we could have looked at the business processes that we use in a number of these programs, largely on the business side, and done some BPR ahead of time before we went into Zero Trust and tagging the data. A lot of this data could be, conflated and put into fourth normal form and reduced in volume considerably if we did that. We know that the same data lives in 4 or 5 or 6 data holdings, legacy systems. And it would have been great to be able to consolidate those things before we went into a Zero Trust exercise to tag it. Alas, there is no time.
Yeah.
And so if there's a challenge to industry here, it's help us with mechanisms that allow us to do that in an automated way. I'll throw it out there. If it means using AI, great. If not, that's okay too. But finding some way to help us do that that doesn't require an 18-month slog of BPR would be terrific.
We're going to call a quick audible, and thanks for that. We're going to call a quick audible. If I could have, and I know every time we mention a subject, all the oxygen goes out of the room. All right, and so quick update on AI and ML integration. Any initial thoughts that we think our industry partners might be interested in?
So this is an exciting time in the National Guard for AI, and because we have an initiative called Project Theo, right? And we're using now our current in the arsenal capability, MQ-9s, working with California Wildfire to look at and be able to predict hotspots and so this is all part of our AI initiative. We partner with some industry and academia organizations to help us with this, but we are looking for industry to help take us to the next level in this arena. This is huge, and what we've seen initially, this is a capability that we will invest in, but we want to get it right, and we welcome industry to work with us to kind of look at some of the capabilities that we haven't even thought of in this arena.
Yeah, so I think what we're really looking at the infrastructure. So as the components are coming to CDAO and ourselves with this increasing demand for AI, machine learning, if you look at our infrastructure today and our data centers and our clouds, right? So our data centers today are typically running at 5 kVA per rack sort of equipment, sort of standard compute, and most of our cloud providers, same sort of thing. We can run the inference side, so the end user querying a model, right, in the sort of common data center architectures. When you look at model training, model fine tuning, That's really the high performance compute architectures with, InfiniBand networks, very highly customized storage, networking, cooling. If you look at where industry is with that type of data center, right, they're at 100 kVA per rack, right? So if you look at our data center infrastructure and footprint, I think what we're going to find is we're going to have to start moving to colo pretty quickly. But one of the things we're doing now is we have our data center team taking a look at what's the department's inventory, which of the data centers are positioned to start and can support some of these workloads, how can we work with GPU vendors and others to get the high performance compute in there to support these models, trying to make sure that we know what these long lead items are, so as the components come to us with here's the requirements, this expanding requirement base that we know what that infrastructure is. I think the one thing that worries me now, and we can talk about GPU supply chains and things like that, but what I'm hearing from our industry partners is what we really have to be concerned about is power. The amount of power that's driving these data centers is off the roof, and is through the roof, and we don't have enough power right now. So I think as one of the things we have to start looking at as a nation and as a whole is how do we start to get, especially clean power to be able to support this next generation. But we're trying to take a look at the infrastructure and the long lead items to be able to support this migration. Are those going to be in place? And then working with our cloud vendors and others to make sure that we have those capabilities available for them.
General Crawford, panelists, we are out of time for the discussion. Thank you for a great panel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Lawrence back to the stage.
Thank you. Terry, we got to check this clock out up here because I do not have any idea what it is doing. My apologies. It is such an honor to continue to serve with you all for these many years, and thank you. That was a great discussion, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to the Q&As because I don't know what's going on with that clock. But anyway, thank you so much for being here with us today. In lieu of a speaker's gift, we're going to give a donation to the Fisher House on behalf of you. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Bruce. So you can see highlights from the upcoming schedule on the screens to each side of the stage. I ask you, we have a few more panels outside, so please join them. And I'd like to highlight the FC Idea panel sponsored by Sienna and Incratech in Theater 1 beginning at 4. Please consult your show guide, our TechNet Cyber app for details. Reminders, General Fredenberg says, we're repeating our network reception on the floor tonight since we got interrupted last night. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thanks, and I'll see you in the morning.
We would like to thank all of you for attending today and hope this conference will be a premier professional development event for you. Remember to check afcia.org/signal to find Signal's daily coverage of today's events.